Okay, now let's see. I'm James Barfield with your Urban Connection. Remember, this is a channel that is often imitated, but never duplicated. And today I'm very, very honored to have as my special guest, Ms. Amy Whitfield. And she is from New Mexico, the state of New Mexico, and she is the executive director of the New Mexico African American Affairs Commission. Welcome to the show, Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, I want to just ask you, start off here with a couple of general questions. What's the African American population in the state of New Mexico?
We are, according to the most recent census, we have about 3% of the New Mexico population. So probably somewhere around 75 or 80,000.
Okay, okay. And basically, as the executive director, what is the mission statement of the New Mexico African American Affairs Commission?
So our overall goal is to improve the lives of African Americans in New Mexico, but our official mission statement is through study, identify, and providing change by means of support, advocacy, and resources relevant to the African American community.
Okay. And it's a statewide organization, of course.
It is, yes.
And you're part of the governor's office, is that correct?
Yes.
You're under
Well, so my position is a governor appointed position, and it sits in the governor's cabinet, or the governor's leadership is what we call it here in New Mexico. But the office is its own separate state agency. It sits, it's independent. It's an independent state agency.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's a nonpartisan organization, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so you don't have to run anything or everything by the governor. Your commission basically sets the agenda and carries out the agenda. Is that correct?
No, so we don't have a commission. We're a separate individual state agency. So, you know, the person I report to is the governor. I don't have to run everything by her. Yet if I do something that our constituents don't like, she would be the one that they call and complain about and make that official grievance. Yeah, but we don't have a commission, we don't have a board. And so it really is, it's just state employees. Our state employees are governed by the state personnel office's governing board. So, you know, what it means to be a classified state employee is the way that we run our office.
Okay. Okay, so when did you do away with the commission?
We've never been a commission. We've never been a commission.
Well, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask this. How many employees do you have under your supervision?
Currently 8.
You have 8.
We have 8 state employees, and then we have 4 contract employees.
Okay, now what do the contract employees do?
So we have a new program that we're doing. It's called the Black Pearls. It's a program for community health workers that are specific to the African American population here in New Mexico. So those folks, they contract, they work for us. Their deliverables and their tasks are provided by someone on my team, but they're actually working and paid for through other clinics and hospitals and academic institutions.
Okay, okay. So going back now to your mission statement, tell me what activities you do to carry out the mission statement.
There are so many, right? You know, the idea of improving the lives of African Americans here in New Mexico is huge. And so we know that there are so many things that we could do. And if we worked on all of those things, we wouldn't move the needle on any one thing. So many years ago, there was an effort to focus the work that we do into 3 pillar areas of economics, education, and health, right? And so we have programs that sit under each one of those things. So we have about 25, close to 25 programs right now. Some of them are very small programs, right, that you'll see once a year. And some of them are huge programs that are always ongoing. So our health programs are really aimed at two different things. One, really helping African Americans in New Mexico navigate the different health resources and really improve their own individual health. And then the second area that we focus on is really making sure that professionals who are serving the African American population are doing that in a culturally relevant and cultural humility way. Under education, we do so many different things. We have a lot of different programs that increase the individual capacity of our young students and our adult learners. That we also have education programs that are really aimed at creating positive learning environments for students in public high schools. And then we have some programs that are focused on what do we help students with in the summer, right? To make sure that they don't end up with that gap that happens between, May and August when they're not in school. And then with economics, we're really focusing on, how do we advance the African American workforce here in New Mexico, making sure that we are not a community of low paid workers, which is often the resources that people want to give us. And then also we really think entrepreneurship is important. And so we have programs that help build up the interest and the availability of African Americans here in New Mexico to be involved in entrepreneurship.
Okay. Now going back to health, and of course, the last couple of years, I know there's been a big push and emphasis on the pandemic, but set that aside, what other areas of health are you involved in?
Yeah. So something here in New Mexico that is huge is infant and maternal mortality. It's almost as if we are a third world country when you look at our infant and maternal mortality statistics. So we try to work very closely with our Department of Health that does a maternal mortality review commission, and really look with them and hold them accountable for looking at those death rates that are happening within our community. We also within that will focus on education opportunities and also connecting our community health workers with those folks who are who are currently pregnant, right? Making sure that they're getting the health care that they need, making sure that they're having all the resources that are available to them. And then one of the things we also do is that we work very closely with our Human Services Department to make sure that they are creating opportunities for African Americans who may not have health insurance or may not have access to good health care, making sure that there's routines and advocacy and all of that, really pushing for better for them.
Okay. Now, of course, some of the things that confront African Americans on a regular basis is heart disease, diabetes, various forms of cancer, and those kinds of things. Do you have collaborations with people directly involved with those particular diseases?
Yes and no, right? So yes, we could say we have a collaboration because we will promote the programs that they have, and at the same time, we don't necessarily believe that their programs are of intense value for the constituents that we serve. It is, when you're talking about diabetes and how difficult that is for our community, and then you partner with someone who wants to provide, diabetes education and health and nutrition education, but they don't always do that and usually don't do that. with an African-American lens, right? They're not talking about the foods that are important to us. They're not talking about the history of how diabetes has become, so prevalent in our community. They don't talk about the media and the food deserts and all of those other things. And so we really try to, for those things that are most common, take a social determinants of health framework.
Sure.
So the work that we're doing to reduce diabetes and stroke and high blood pressure and all those things that we're most known for, what you'll see happening within our office is things that are much more upstream. So we have a gardening project happening right now. We're working in 2 of the cities in New Mexico, partnering with Black Health New Mexico, to have a community garden, and making sure that community garden is available to grow the community garden, but also to distribute that food in a meaningful way. And also really making sure that different community groups in New Mexico that serve African Americans are being part of the Food and Hunger Project that New Mexico has. The Food and Hunger Project of New Mexico was awarded about $13 million from our legislature this past January. And so we're trying to make sure that African American community groups really have a lot of access to the grants that come out of that $13 million, because a lot of times African Americans in New Mexico have plenty of food, right? They don't have plenty of nutrition.
Right.
And so that equals diabetes, that equals high blood pressure, that equals stroke. And so we don't necessarily need to do more, giving people food stamps and more community food boxes and things like that. What we need to do is make sure that we are creating space for people to have healthy, nutritious food. Sure. And know how to use it, and that it is culturally relevant.
Okay, that's good, and I like that idea. Now, let me ask you, you mentioned grants. Grants, and what range are these grants that you provide?
So we don't provide them. They go through the Food and Hunger Project of New Mexico that's run through the governor's office. And so, they are ranging anywhere from, $2,000, $3,000 for a one-time event, up to $250,000 because someone wants to create a food pantry and needs all of the different equipment to get it up and running. So it's a huge project that started in January through the governor's office and is doing a wide range of things, but the focus of that money is not to do direct services, but to really create something that can be lasting into the future.
Now, is that kind of like a substitute? You mentioned about the food deserts, and of course we all have those, but is your food pantry something like maybe a substitute for a grocery store?
It can be, right? So food pantries are, many churches or many schools have, available that you can go in and grab canned goods and, dried pastas and rice and all that kind of stuff. And that's a food pantry, right? Just anywhere you can go and get direct, food, direct service for food.
Will that include fresh poultry? I'm sorry, produce? Fruits and produce?
At this point, there's only a few food pantries that offer fresh fruits and produce, right? But with this grant, we're really hoping that more can, right? So, with this grant, if you have a church that already has a food pantry and they'd like to start serving fruits and vegetables, but they don't have a refrigerator, they can write for a grant to get a refrigerator in their food pantry. Something else is they may want to make a partnership with a local grower. And so, possibly there's we have several different local growers who are African-American here in New Mexico, and we could partner them with, a sorority or a fraternity group that wants to do community service. And so every Saturday after the grower leaves the farmer's market and has, leftover food that they've already harvested, they could give it to the sorority who could then hand it out on Sunday or Monday, right? And so it's projects like that the grants, that the Food and Hunger Project of New Mexico is really looking at. And so our job in that, the role of the Office of African American Affairs is to support different community groups in that serve African Americans and make sure they're creating their grant and getting it up into the governor's office.
Okay. And are these grants one time, or are these based every year? I mean, could one individual get a grant this year and then also apply next year?
Well, so the money for this project is for this year. They have a 5-year plan, and so we don't know yet what that second year will look like, but we know what this year looks like.
Okay, fine. Now let's move on to another area, economics, which is oftentimes in our areas and our communities overlooked. Tell me what you're doing there to help build and create economic opportunities for our people.
Sure. So my role is to work very closely with the other cabinet secretaries. We have a department here that is the Economic Development Department. And so really working with them to make sure that there are minority specific opportunities within the projects that they do. For instance, right, they are working right now on doing film projects. Film is huge here in New Mexico. We have a lot of film industry projects, and so they're working specifically to make sure that the film office has specific projects that they reach out to minority populations on. And so we focus on that. The other thing that we do to directly serve the community is we do a Cornerstones of Entrepreneurship program. And that really is kind of the kickstart to anyone who wants to form their own business, start their own business, and needs some help around how to do that and not get in trouble with taxes, not, get passed over for venture capital. How do you do a pitch and a proposal? And so, we do some training around that. New Mexico just legalized cannabis. And so one of the things that's going to be huge for us in this next year is how do we make sure that we are advocating and supporting our community for some of those licenses for cannabis growers and sellers.
Now, is this for medical marijuana or is this for recreational use?
Recreational. We passed recreational last year. Yeah. And so April 1st, New Mexico started selling recreational marijuana.
Okay. Well, that should bring in a lot of dollars to your economic development group and a lot of tax dollars. And that should be a win-win for your entire city and community, state,
That's what they say. We're looking forward to having, 1 to 3 years of data to show us exactly how much it's bringing in.
Okay. Now, also, I want to get back to the education now. Are you guys doing anything to help improve the test scores for African Americans, help improve the reading scores? Because, there's a report that I know here in the state of Kansas, I'll put it that way, about 60% of the fourth graders cannot efficiently read by the time they enter the fourth grade. And then, of course, we all know the disparities in the test scores between African Americans and non-African Americans is wider than it certainly should be. Are you doing anything in those areas?
Yeah. So again, we work really closely with the state agencies that are responsible for that work. So we work very closely with our public education department. The public education, we just passed in 2021, the Black Education Act, which is legislation that looks very closely at, data on that white-Black educational attainment gap. And then also, what are the solutions to move things forward? What kind of curriculum needs to be designed in order to shift that achievement gap? What kind of training do our teachers and our support staff need in order to work on that? And what kind of resources need to be in our schools? Resources that are psychological resources, social things like, reaching out for those who have poverty. And so we're working very closely with that group, but they have their own unit. The Black Education Act has their own team within the public education department, and they're the ones that do most of that work. And so we just partner with them. What we focus on more in this office is really looking at what are the culturally specific spaces for our youth that make them feel comfortable in schools, right? And so the reading gap that you're talking about and the writing gap, that starts all the way back in pre-K, you know, and we start noticing it dramatically in the 4th grade. But then what we also start noticing dramatically is in the 9th grade, students who are really feeling uncomfortable in their schools, and that it is more advantageous to them to drop out of school and to go straight into work than it is to stay in their schools. So we're advocating for the creation of culturally specific spaces in our high schools and also in our colleges, places where students can go and can feel comfortable. So, you know, that's usually a BSU. Some other schools might call it something different. Just really making sure that our high schools have that space.
True. Okay. Now I'm going to switch to another topic, politics. And of course, we know every year your state legislature in any city passes or proposes certain bills and legislation. Some of it, oftentimes a lot of it, is harmful to people of color or African Americans. Do you have a program to, some states call it Bill Watch, where at the beginning of the year, you will look and see what bills are being formulated or proposed or whatever, and follow those all the way through the end result and see what, you know, what is passed and what is not passed.
Yeah, so as a state government agency, we can't do that officially, right? We cannot promote any bill that would be considered lobbying, or but we can really, you know, educate and advocate for certain bills. Usually we talk about those bills with community organizations, and the community organizations are the ones that really do that. Here in New Mexico, we have the Black Central Organizing Committee. It's a group that's, you know, newly formed. They have done an amazing job of doing some Bill Watch stuff, but also really pushing through policy that is specific, positively specific for us, rather than, you know, some of those other bills that kind of just leave us in the side. So that's one of the things we do. Also for our office, because we're a state agency, and so, you know, we are nonpartisan and sit back and we'll answer questions from legislators, but we will not lobby for something or try to push something forward. That what we can do is, way before bills come up, is that we do kind of a what is the political space that would improve the lives of African Americans here in New Mexico. And so we do a lot of research and policy analysis that we can provide to community groups before bills come forward, and actually can inform people about what kind of bills should be moved forward. So we can look at model policies that are happening in Kansas and think about how they might be implemented here in New Mexico, and then, you know, provide that information to our legislators or to our community groups, so that they see things that they might put into place, that they might move forward as bills.
Okay. Now, you mentioned back earlier when I asked you about your mission statement, and you talked about basically defining problem areas and then providing workable solutions. So basically, how do you do that, and who do you send these problem solvers? Who do you send those to? I mean, your recommendations, who do they go to for making improvements in these various programs?
Yeah, I mean, we have so many different ways of doing that as a state government agency. So, you know, I think the easiest way to do that is for me to have conversations with people in the governor's office about how we can move things forward. There are legislators who have expressed an interest in our mission, and so meeting with them and talking to them about possible solutions that they can bring forward, really educating them on ways that some of their bills might impact the African American community. We do that a lot. A lot of what gets done in state government isn't necessarily through policies, but it's through the rules and the implementation that other state agencies do. And so we spend a lot of time working with other state agencies on those projects that they're doing to make sure they implement them in an equitable way, right? I think one of the examples we have is that our public education department just created a new social studies standards. And so that went through rules. It didn't go through policy. And so in the work that we've done and other community organizations who are advocating for African Americans in New Mexico, is that work was really to inform the task force working on those social studies standards, how important ethnic studies is for our students. Really making sure that they don't get bogged down in, wanting to not speak about things that are controversial. I don't know why the truth is controversial, but some people believe it is, right? And so, we advocated for the benefits of having that history taught. We advocated for how do you include history and other ethnic studies key areas in not just, right, like history. It should be in multiple different things. And one of the things that I think is really important is that we don't just say, okay, hey, let's talk about this history, but that also part of our social studies process is what is the process of civic engagement, and making sure that that was included as well.
Okay. And I asked that question because oftentimes in my opinion, we find ourselves doing the same old thing, which is maybe defining the problem, but never providing any solutions to the problem. So year in and year out, we're identifying the same old problems. Okay, and they keep reoccurring because we're not offering any solutions. And that's what I like to see. Now, so let me ask you this. How do you stay transparent with the people you're supposed to be serving and whose lives you're supposed to be helping to improve and make improvements in their lifestyles?
Yeah. So all of that is built into our responsibilities as a state government. Anything that we create that is publishable, so any reports, any public information, all of that has to be sent to our state records. And so no one has to ask me for that information. It is state law that it all goes to the state records. So anyone who wants to see any of that can just call the state records, or state library is what we call it here. And that the state library will give you whatever you ask for, right? Even if all you ask is to see, what did the Office of African American Affairs publish this year, they'll show you everything that we published in the whole year. The other thing that New Mexico has is a IPRA, right? It's an information protection rights, and it means that anything that happens in state government, all a constituent or a media news outlet or anyone in New Mexico, anyone outside of New Mexico, all they have to do is make an IPRA request and they can see that. So they can see what happens through my emails of all my staff, not just me, of all my staff. They can ask for our emails. They can ask for meeting notes of different meetings that we've had. They can ask for reports. They can ask for whatever they want. There's a few exceptions, right? You can't have personnel records and things like that. But other than that, anything that the community wants to see, they need only ask. The other thing that our state government requires is that we have what we call the procurement code. And so there are many rules about how we can spend money and what we can spend it on. And so in order to spend even $1, I have to go through a huge process to really ask to spend that money. And so first of all, the process stops me from just spending money that I don't have reasons to spend, but also that process can be transparent. So anyone who wants to know the documentation behind something that I spent money on, they can ask for that as well. And then we also have a website, right? Our website puts up all the different things that we do. It's connected to our YouTube and our Instagram, so people can see what we've done publicly in the community.
Okay. Now, you talked about the total transparency and everything basically that you do is available to the public. But you also, I know for a fact because I get these, you also do weekly newsletters.
Yes.
And those are sent out to, I'm sure you have a mailing list of petitions, but those are a part of being what I call transparent, okay? And letting people know what you guys are doing, because your group, as well as any others that are members of the governor's umbrella, are funded by tax dollars. So the taxpayers have a right to know where their money is going, how it's being spent, and what other programs that this group is using to assist and improve the quality of life for African-American taxpayers. And I know, like I said, that you do that on a weekly basis. And I also want to ask you about I know that you do, I don't know if you do quarterly reports or semi-annual, but I know that you do annual reports. And I have here, I've gotten several of those, and I have here the last one, I believe, for 2021. And let me see if I can, and I want to ask you, so you probably are about ready to have a new one for 2022, aren't you? There we go.
So it's for the fiscal year. So our fiscal year ends in June 30th of 2022. So we usually put out the annual report by September or October.
Okay. And on your website, you have another way, in another form of transparency, you have annual reports going all the way back to at least 2014 posted on your website. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if it's 2014, but yes, they go back pretty far. Yeah.
Okay.
Our strategic plan, as well as our financial audits and our year-end reports are all on the website. Yes.
Now, are those annual reports mandated by the legislature?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And that's under state statute, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
For all departments, not for us, for all state agencies.
Sure.
Some of our commissions don't, have to do that. It depends. So we have a Martin Luther King Jr. Commission. If you go to their website, you might not see their reports because they don't run the same, they're not governed under the same statute as a state agency is.
Do they have a budget?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now, I wanted to talk just a little bit about you and your organization. I kind of lost my train of thought here a little bit, but basically, you have 75,000 African Americans spread out approximately, spread out through the state of New Mexico. And you do yearly, each year you do several town hall meetings. And
we did that in 2019. We don't do it every year, but okay. I can answer questions about it. Yeah.
Okay, but primarily when you do those, about how many of those would you say you do?
So we have 9 counties in New Mexico that have what we call a significant population of African Americans. And so we try to do one, when we do them, they're usually, the town hall meetings are the way that we produce our strategic plan. And so the town hall meetings happen just before the strategic plan. So the 9 counties that have a high, significant number of African Americans in their counties, will get a town hall. And usually here in Albuquerque, our large metro area, we'll probably have 2, maybe 3.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And now, the town hall meetings that you have, is that a good opportunity for you to hear what is on the minds of the people that you represent?
It's one of the ways we do that, absolutely, right? It becomes, I would say that our involvement in multiple different projects is a better way for us to get that voice, only because when we're doing the town hall meetings, we do it very specifically to guide our strategic plan. And so, you know, as workshops are facilitated, they're really focused not on what African Americans in New Mexico think or, you know, want. It's really focused on what should the Office of African American Affairs as a state government agency focus on under this administration, right?
Sure.
And so we have many other opportunities to really just hear African American voice. There's so many projects that we have. You've seen our newsletter, so you see the articles that we do every week. You know, so we do a informational article every week. We also have an article once a month that people in the community are allowed to write an article for us that we'll distribute. We also have a deep bench, which allows people to promote their own professional capacity for leadership. And there's some questions on there that we take very seriously as ways that inform us of what, you know, one of the questions on there is what can we do to increase the impact of African Americans in New Mexico? And so we do a report after a year of those articles to talk about, this is what Black people in New Mexico are saying New Mexico needs in order to support us. And so there's multiple different ways that we do that, but the town halls is one of them for sure.
Sure. Okay. Now, I want to get to this, and I'm winding down now.
Okay.
Basically, you mentioned that you have a staff of how many?
I have 8 like staff that work for me and 4 contractors.
Okay. Now, with the work that the amount of work that you are charged with doing, can you imagine doing this by yourself?
I would do less. I would do less of the work. That's for sure. Yes. I mean, we can do what our, like, you know, I would love to have more people. And if we had more people, we would do more. And if we had less people, we would do less.
Sure. Okay. And I think that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
And there was one word that I left out there. I was intending to say, can you imagine doing this effectively by yourself? But, you know, it's all the same, you know. But
well, I'll tell you, you know, one of the issues that we have in our agency is a very high turnover, right? Is
okay.
that if I were going to complain about our office, I don't want to complain about our office, but if I was going to, we're a very small agency within state government. And so it's really hard for people to grow within this agency, right? If you are ambitious and excited about this work, you know, you probably are not going to stay in this office because, you know, you'll go get a job at one of the other state agencies or get a job in another community nonprofit or something like that. And so there have been times in this agency where the director was the only person on staff waiting to hire other people. There have also been times in this agency where they didn't have a director, right? And so the staff was kind of floating, I guess you could say, and getting things done. It is one of the saddest, for me, the saddest things that happens in our agency is that we are not provided the level of funding that gives anyone who wants to work for their community the opportunity to also grow professionally and climb the career ladder within this agency.
Sure. And when you mentioned the period of time, there have been period of times when you didn't have a director. And the latest one was what, about 2 years ago when your director, I think, maybe got upset by an action taken by the governor and just took off. And it took
I
a
would
while
say
to
he
fill
took
that
off.
position. I'm sorry.
I wouldn't say he took off. He resigned.
Right,
He
right.
resigned. He felt
Abruptly.
like, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And you know, he's been a leader in our community for so many years and did not stop doing that, just stopped working for state government. And so he resigned, and there were probably about two, maybe 3 months where there was no one. And then they asked me to come over on an interim basis, and I was here working this job and a job that I had with our protective services and juvenile justice agency. And I did that for about 1.5 years before we figured out this was probably the permanent place for me. So you could say we were without a director for 1.5 years, although I was here sort of, kind of, right?
Was there, in your opinion, was there a deliberate reason for taking so long to fill the position?
Yes, and I think it was a very positive deliberate, right? And so we wanted to make sure the office was 21 years old when that resignation happened. And after 21 years, the office has grown. I mean, even though, right, like it's only 8 employees, but it started with a loner employee, right? 21 years ago, 22 years now, 22 years ago. So the office had grown. It had grown in its number of staff, but it had also grown in its capacity, and it had grown in just its reach throughout the state and its reach throughout our government. And so it was time to really sit back and say, what is the structure that this office should have moving forward? And so we spent the last 1.5 years really looking at, I call it the pipes behind the walls, right? So, what kind of pipes behind the walls need to be built in order for us to have, a really strong office moving forward. So we were able to do that, and also at the same time, really think about what should the skill level and the resume of the director look like, right? Because it wasn't, and it should not have been just an automatic, well, Amy's there, so give the job to her, right? It really should have been a very guided discussion about, if this is the direction that the office is going and that this is what African Americans in New Mexico need, then we need to look at the resume very closely of who we put in charge. And so it was a very deliberate effort to have me doing interim work of building those pipes behind the walls. And I'm super proud of the work that we've done over the last 1.5 years. But I know that there are many people who would look at our website and say, well, you didn't put out as much in, FY21 as you did in FY19 or FY18, you didn't have as many events. We didn't do as many things because we've spent a lot of time building up that structure. And I think we're much better for it.
Along those lines, I want to say that I think any governor, if that governor is sincere about having an effective African-American affairs commission or department, I don't know how they could look at it any other way except hiring the best person for the job. And you don't go out and hire some crony just because they happen to be a friend or a loyal, a partisan. That is insulting to us, is disrespectful to us. And it tells me that that governor is not sincere, okay, in making sure this department does what it is supposed to do by state statute. Now, the final thing I want to say to you, let me say this. I know a little bit about the history of your organization, and I want to tell you, I'm impressed by, you talk about 21 years ago. 21 years ago, and you know this as well as I do, as you said, you started off with a loaner, okay? And that loaner came to set this thing up, and the rules were they were not to be paid a salary. Your initial budget was $100,000. No salaries were to come out of that money. Now that to me means that you're going to hire somebody and you're going to get somebody in there that is dedicated and committed to this position in this organization. And they're going to do everything they can do, including surrounding themselves with people that are of the same mindset. They want to use this for the benefit and the good of African Americans in the state of, I don't care if it's New Mexico, if it's Michigan, if it's Kansas. That's how you do it, and you don't stop, and you continue to do it. And you guys have been doing it for 21 years. That $100,000 budget is now over 800,000. You have to be commended for that. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, that is not the work of me, so I will not take any credit. I will definitely say thank you, but I want to also 100% give credit to the previous directors who made that happen, right? And so, you know, we started with the loaner with Mr. Kalanji Mwanza. You know, he was on loan to us from CYFD, and Dr. Doris Fields, who was on loan to us from the Department of Health. And they really created structure for the organization. We then had Director Alice Hops, who made sure that there was a formal budget for the office, making sure that we were part of the Legislative General Fund request that happens every year. Then we had Dr. Harold Bailey, who ran the office for 2 administrations, I believe. So about 8 or 9 years, who really built this office up. Made sure that the office was focused on pillar areas, had a mission, had, you know, the ways that the office could be focused. And then we went to someone who is a mentor and just a personal, you know, goal. She is my hashtag, you know, success professional goals. I want to be like her when I grow up. Director Yvette Bell Kaufman, who really made sure that people looked at the office as a political, you know, space to engage with, right? Made sure that we had data and reports and things that could inform and educate policy, so that policy could be written by us and written by African Americans in New Mexico and supported with the data to back it up, so that no legislator could say to us, well, maybe we should start with studying this, because we could say, no, the Office of African American Affairs has already studied it. And so over the years, they have built up an amazing, strong office, and I get to move forward the work that I dream of doing and that they created for me to do.
Well, I've been involved with your organization on a limited basis ever since about probably 2012. And I can tell you, from my standpoint, from observing, and of course I'm on the outside looking in, but from everything that I've been able to ascertain, each and every one of those executive directors have been committed and dedicated to fulfilling the statute as was outlined by your state legislature. And I believe it was in 1997, wasn't it? I think
1999, yeah.
99, okay. So there you have it. So good job. Yeah. And
thank you.
You will keep up the good work and carry on the legacy.
Thank you.
Amy Whitfield.
Appreciate your time.
Director of the New Mexico African American Affairs Group. Mrs. Whitfield, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed talking with you, ma'am. And I want to thank you for taking time out to join me and my audience this afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was a pleasure to share.
Okay. And you have a good afternoon, ma'am.
You too.
Good talking to you.